Hey everybody, Aaron Blaise here, and I am so excited to have my friend Kevin Deters. Kevin and I have been friends for 28 years now, and we started at Disney as very young children. And we've worked on a lot of things together. And you know, one of the things that I'm always pushing for when we create courses at Creature Art Teacher is to have people that are actually in the field still, talking about and teaching what they do. And so we are so honored and lucky to have Kevin here talking about a new course that he's created, Constructing the Perfect Pitch. And I'll tell you, it is the perfect pitch. It's really great. I've had the privilege to be sitting on the sidelines listening to this entire course be created over the last few days, and I'm telling you, it's really, really great. But rather than me talk about it, I think I'm going to hand it over to Kevin. I'm going to let you talk about yourself a little bit, your favorite subject.
Sure.
And then tell you a little bit about the course.
Sure, happy to. And thanks again for including me.
Yeah.
I've been working for Disney animation for the last 28 years or so. First at Disney Feature Animation, Walt Disney Animation Studios, as now known. Yeah, worked together there for many years, and now for the last 6 years I've been at Disney Television Animation. Was fortunate to work on many great feature films at Feature with you and with many other talented artists, and was fortunate to also to write and direct some short films, some holiday specials for which I was lucky to win a couple of Emmys. So
Prep and Landing.
Yeah, that's right, Prep and Landing, if you guys know that. And over at Disney Television Animation, I was most recently the executive producer, showrunner on the second season of Monsters at Work, which is on Disney Plus, and currently working on a new Prep and Landing special called Prep and Landing: The Snowball Protocol, which we just announced last summer at the Annecy Film Festival. So in this new course, what I've trying to do is take the seed of an idea. In this case, I picked a public domain property, and the Three Little Pigs, actually, and which is, you know, an old famous fable, and I gave myself the assignment for the purposes of the course to develop that idea into an animated comedy series. So, you know, how's that going to look for modern audiences, and what sort of characters are going to live in this interpretation of the world, and what does the world look like, and what do we want to say about the world and these characters that live in it. My goal with this class is to showcase how I like to think in terms of developing a pitch that we put forth in executive meetings, studio executives, fellow directors, whomever it might be, starting with the kernel of an idea all the way to something that takes a look at what the world, the characters, the thematic ideas, dramatic question, and
I'm going to interrupt you really quick, because one of the things I really liked as I was sitting on the sidelines, you know, you and I have had similar paths through Disney and the animation world, and so there's so many terms that are going to come up that you guys will hear, like, you know, the elevator pitch and the log line and all these different things that he covers that are going to be really, really helpful in a studio situation where you might find yourself and you want to pull something together. Like I said, it can be everything from the 40-second elevator pitch, as we call it, where you gotta get an idea out before, you know, you get off, the executive gets off the elevator, all the way to pitching an entire pitch deck, which you did.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really chock full of that wonderful information.
Yeah, what I tried to do was just take an idea based on an existing public domain material and pretend that we have an assignment to develop this idea into an animated comedy series, and evolve it from premise to, you know, which kind of characters are we going to have in this world? What's the world look like? What are we going to sort of talk about? What are the general sort of storylines that might be part of this this idea, and construct a pitch around that can be.
Yeah, it really is a great example of how to take an idea and really fill it out and get it to the point where you can get it in front of somebody that might be able to help you get it off the ground, whether it's an executive, somebody with money or something. But it really is it's really wonderful information that I'm really excited that Kevin, who has all that experience, you know, can be sharing with you all. So go on over to creatureartteacher.com and check out the brand new course from Kevin Deters. And in the meantime, enjoy this sneak peek. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Hey everybody, welcome to Constructing the Perfect Pitch. My name is Kevin Deters, and number one, thank you very much for signing up for this class. I really hope you enjoy it. I've enjoyed putting it together over the last few months, and I hope it's something that you'll find useful and educational. The class goal, in my mind, is to give everyone some insight into how I develop ideas for an animated project. Although really the same process can be applied to live action or writing. It's all about telling stories, right? And my goal is to showcase how I develop something from just the spark of an idea to a clear and hopefully somewhat concise pitch deck, if you will, or presentation, keynote, a PowerPoint, that sort of thing. Something that you could share with friends, family, potentially studio executives, that sort of thing, right? So my plan over this course is to take you through my approach and to really give you a sense of how I think. And my hope is that you'll find it useful in developing your own ideas, whatever they might be. I've been fortunate to have a long career, as I'll talk about. I've seen many ideas pitched, and I have pitched many ideas myself. Some that I've developed and with others, by myself, that sort of thing. So. I hope you find my experience valuable. So really, there's no absolute right way to go about doing this. This class is not about me telling you, oh, that you have to do it this way. It's not about how to do it necessarily. It's more about me showcasing and sharing what I have found works for me. And my hope is that my approach might provide some pointers for you to help you develop your own stories, your own methodology, that sort of thing. So let's dive in a little bit. I'm going to give you a little teaser of what this idea that we're going to develop over this course is, and it's something called PigPens. And we'll get into that later, but essentially it's going to be an adaptation of the classic fable, The Three Little Pigs. So, introduction, right? First off, I want to say thank you to my good friend Aaron Blaise for asking me to teach this course. I've known Aaron for almost 30 years. We all had brown hair back in the day, and we spent a lot of time together at Disney, and it was really lovely for him to ask me to teach this course. So who am I, right? And why am I teaching this course? Let me get into it. So I've spent about 30 years now working in the animation industry. I'm very grateful for it. There's been a lot of ups and downs, mostly ups, a lot of wonderful experiences. I've started in the industry in 1994, so probably before a lot of you were even alive. And since 1996, I have worked almost entirely for the Disney company. I started at Walt Disney Animation Studios, or as it was known then in 1996, Disney Feature Animation. And I spent 22 years there, as I'll get into a little bit later. And then the last 6 years, I've spent working at Walt Disney Television Animation. I'm based in the California studios and been fortunate to work with a lot of really wonderful people over the years. Some of the projects that I'm very proud to have contributed to are here on the screen here. My time at Disney, Mulan was my very first feature film that I got to work on. Again, I started in 1996 at the Florida studio as it existed then, working with Aaron, among others, and was really proud of the fact that I got to work on the feature film Mulan. It was a wonderful experience. We had a big crew of people. It was sort of everyone's real first foray into a big feature film. And as a studio, we worked very, very hard to produce something that I think we're all very proud of. And at the end of the day, that's what really makes it all gratifying. I've worked on a lot of projects since then, as you can see, in various roles, some of which never got made. That's sometimes what happens, of course, in development when you're pitching ideas. Sometimes ideas work, you develop them, but ultimately they don't pan out for one reason or another. And I've certainly had that happen. Sometimes it's painful, but often I find that you can always learn from the experience and apply it to the next thing. I've worked in various capacities on these different projects, starting on Mulan, as I mentioned, as a cleanup animation artist, the good old traditional days of pen and paper or pencil and paper. And I started as an in-betweener, as most people did back then, and rose up the ranks a little bit in the animation department before I transitioned into the story department, working on Brother Bear with Aaron. And that was a really great experience. We had a small group at the Florida studio, and then we were able to sort of work collaboratively with story team in California. And so it was an interesting early pre-FaceTime days of bi-coastal communication. And that was a really wonderful experience. It taught me a lot. And from there, I went on to continue doing storyboards and other films, eventually becoming a director at Disney Animation and a writer as well on some of my own projects. As a director, I was part of the Story Trust Director Roundtable, as we called it, with our studio leadership. And all of us would get together looking at everyone's feature films or shorts or whatever it might be as a work in progress and trying to collaborate to give feedback and notes and to really help sort of build the best film that we could build. With the hope being that, all the projects, they all affect the other, each other. So someone else's project does well, yours is likely going to do well also, because it was a really wonderful sort of collaborative experience working with that group of folks. So at Disney Television Animation, for the last 5 or 6 years or so, I've been working as an executive producer, working on animated television series, and I'll mention Monsters at Work, season 2 there at the lower right is the one I most recently completed. And executive producer is sort of another term for showrunner, you might know, sort of creatively in charge of the project, guiding the content, and ultimately kind of a glorified director. So it's not too dissimilar from the directing role at feature animation. I've been fortunate also to do a little bit of voice acting. I've been told I have the face for radio, so I try to apply that to my vocal performances. I was cast in Wreck-It Ralph as Clyde the ghost, the Pac-Man ghost, thanks to my friend Rich Moore, who directed that film. And that was a fun experience. And I've done a little bit of voice acting over the years, a lot of it in my own projects. But I was also a voice in Ralph Breaks the Internet, the sequel to Wreck-It Ralph, as one of the stormtroopers, which was dream come true because I love Star Wars. And also one of the pop-up ads that occur early on in the movie. And so that's always a lot of fun to kind of get in the recording booth and play around. So to begin with, I would really like to talk a little bit about what made me into a storyteller. And again, I think at the risk of sounding self-indulgent and just talking about myself, eventually over this course, I hope that you'll see how my life experience informs the ideas that I try to develop and create, and how I think there's real value in that. And let's get into it a little bit here. Welcome to the next section of my class. I hope you guys have been enjoying everything we've been talking about so far. Obviously, we're developing the Three Little Pigs as an animated comedy series called PigPens. And we've talked about the basic hook, and we talked about kind of the dramatic question to explore. We talked a bit about the world that we're going to establish called Farmington. And now the next question to answer is, who lives in our world? And continuing with my construction motif, you can see here the early framework of the house that I grew up in, and there's adorable children standing in front of it, are me and my younger brother. So we lived in that world, right? So PigPens, right? It's very important to understand the underlying motivations of your characters. What's driving them? What do they want? What do they actually need? These are all sort of casual phrases that are thrown around, but it's great value to really understand it, or at least have a sense of where you want to go with it. In terms of like want versus need, I always go back to the Rolling Stone song of all things. You can't always get what you want, but as the lyrics say, if you try, sometimes you'll get what you need. And I think encapsulated in that song, it sort of tells you what you want to do with your characters as far as making sure that they'll ideally will get what they want, what their stated want is, but they only can do it by sort of embracing what they actually need, something that they might not even realize on a subconscious level, for instance. And ideally, they get what they want in an unexpected way. So we'll get into the specifics a little bit. I would encourage you, when thinking about characters, to find inspiration in real people in your life. I've talked a little bit about how I approach that, and I think that's really helpful. If and nothing else, if you're stuck, trying to figure out what kind of guy or gal is this, and what do they do, and what kind of people are they? I just start thinking about people that really just bubble up from my own life, and there's we all know lots of distinct personalities for some great, some not so great maybe, but certainly it's a great shorthand to quickly start to construct a character. And I'll give you an example of how I developed a character with that in mind. So, you look at family, look at friends, teachers, coworkers. It could just be a casual encounter. Maybe somebody that you observed at a coffee shop. That really stuck in your head as far as some kind of interaction. And I also like to find character comps. We talked about comps of the actual show itself. I like the idea of also looking at character comps in existing television series and films, also literature, books, novels, comic books, to help others that you're pitching to understand what it is that you're describing, what you're imagining in your brain. Again, as far as comps go, I don't look at it as copying something else, copying someone else's homework, as it were. It's really just trying to make our audience that we're pitching to understand what we're thinking by offering some recognizable examples that we're all aware of, if that makes sense. So, and as far as creating characters too, I try not to literally cast the characters, and by that I mean like picking the voice actor that has to do the role, for instance, if it gets made. Sometimes that can be helpful, and it's okay to have a list of of actors that you think would be great, or you love their voices and you think they might be great in the role. But we're just really talking about character right now. So if the voice actor that you maybe have in mind has portrayed characters that you can use as comps, great, that's fine. But ultimately, for now, I think let's create a sort of a Venn diagram of these different comps to start to paint a picture of what our hopefully unique character will be, and to allow for some flexibility, right? You want to make sure that you're not letting that foundation set before you need to. So let me talk a little bit about an example from one of our past projects that I worked on, and that's the characters of Prep and Landing. Again, if you haven't seen it, that's okay, but I encourage you to do so. Prep and Landing, the main character in the specials is an elf named Wayne, who's pictured in the middle here, and he's voiced by Dave Foley. And when we were talking about Wayne, well before we cast Dave as the voice, we talked about this elf who had been on the job working as one of Santa's Prep and Landing elves for 227 years. He was frustrated by not being able to sort of move up in his world, and felt like it was becoming a monotonous existence. And he was a bit curmudgeonly, and is so in the special. And he eventually sort of learns that his job has value, and that he finds a renewed zest for his occupation. So we were talking about that as a concept early on. We looked at our own lives and the people around us at work. And I had been at Disney for many, many years. My creative partner on the project, Stevie Wormers, she had also been there a long time. And so we sort of saw ourselves in Wayne in certain ways, and that, you've been on the job day in, day out, and sometimes it can get a little monotonous. And so that was helpful inspiration as far as starting to dial into Wayne, and again, investing ourselves into the development of the character. As far as like comps for Wayne, I recall back in the day, this was 2008, 2009, a little while ago, we had talked about the character that Paul Giamatti plays in the movie Sideways, who's a very frustrated writer trying to get published, and he's really sort of banging his head against the wall of life. That was a good comp. A lot of the characters that Bill Murray plays, sort of wry, sardonic sort of characters. And so that was where we sort of focused our efforts initially before we really got into casting. Dave Foley does an incredible job, and he definitely embodies a lot of the personality traits that we've talked about with Wayne. I wouldn't say he's curmudgeonly, but he's definitely sardonic and a wonderful comedic actor. But again, we didn't start with him being cast as the character. We started with archetypes, recognizable comps that we could talk about, so that we could discuss it with the studio leadership that we were trying to develop the character with. In addition to Wayne, we had Lanny, who, as I mentioned, again, if you haven't seen it, he's sort of the optimistic rookie partner to Wayne. He's new to the prep and landing division, to contrast with Wayne's sort of veteran, grizzled character. And we looked at Lanny, we looked at the studio, the people around us at the studio, and there's a lot of fresh-faced employees at Disney, and who had worked long and hard to get into the studio, as I had back in the day. And, very enthusiastic, very peppy, very just excited to sort of be there and immerse themselves in the culture of the studio. So that was really helpful. So within the ranks of our own coworkers, we sort of found great character dynamic between these two main characters. And as far as the comp goes, the show 30 Rock at the time was very popular. And the character of Kenneth the Page, played by Jack McBrayer, is this sort of fresh off the farm, optimistic kind of character that's working there at 30 Rock with Tina Fey's character. And so that was a good archetype for that. And then finally, the other main character in the show is a character named McGee, who I'd mentioned before. She's the North Pole Christmas Eve Command Center Coordinator, or NPCECCC, too many C's, I think, for short. And she, rather than sort of really talk about character archetypes for this, we were able to dial in very quickly based on the role that we needed for McGee to play, which was the sort of producer of Christmas, if you will, like the one that's sort of making sure that everybody's on time and on schedule, and Lanny and Wayne are getting where they need to be, all that sort of thing. So we just looked down the hallway at our production management folks that we were working with at Disney, and really sort of drew from their personalities. In fact, it's no secret, we've talked about this before, but the character of McGee is based on two real people that were a part of the prep and landing specials back in the day. Dorothy McKim, who was our lovely producer on the show, and McGee is sort of literally fashioned after her as far as haircut and some of her mannerisms and affinity for lots of jewelry, that sort of thing. And Jenny McGee Cook, who sort of embodies her personality, and the dynamic between McGee and Wayne very much reminds me of the relationship that I have had with Jenny for many years, where we were co-workers and friends and liked to butt heads and push each other's buttons occasionally. And so she came to life as a character, McGee did, again, naming it after Jenny, very quickly. And so we thought we had a great trio of characters. So that was just an example from my own personal sort of production experience. So now it's time to talk about our pig siblings in our PigPens comedy series that we're developing. Who are these guys going to be, and how can we explore, making them interesting spins on the, generally familiar fable that most folks have some passing awareness of, at least. So for PigPens, I think it'd be fun to base our main characters of the three pigs on the three building types, the building materials that are in the original story, right? Of course, we have straw, we have sticks, and we have brick. The three little pigs all using their own materials to build their homes. The first two, of course, getting blown down by the big bad wolf. So I think it's interesting because, they sort of distinctly different materials. And since our three main characters are all pigs, and in our case, they're going to be siblings, we definitely want to be able to tell them apart. Again, this is an early pitch to try to sell the idea, so we're not worried about character design or anything like that at this point. But I think that it's helpful to create a quick shorthand of the characters, especially if you're going to do some drawings and include illustrations, that sort of thing, so that the uneducated folks that are not aware of what you're trying to sell yet can quickly sort of recognize those different characters as soon as you sort of put them up on screen. So we also want our characters to have very distinct, gettable personalities, especially for the comedic tone that we've been talking about, right? And it's not that they have to be one-dimensional characters, because no one in real life is only one thing, right? But ideally, they'll have a defining trait or two that we can sort of point to convey clearly what we're talking about, right? And those defining traits, they'll really help create specificity and allow for fun character dynamics. The humor will ideally come from the characters and the way that they react to specific situations and each other, and the way they react to other characters reacting to certain situations. That to me is where the best comedy comes from, as opposed to relying on simple pratfalls or generic sort of insults, that sort of thing. So that's sort of the way I like to approach it. So, much like the people that we have in our own lives who we know well, whether it be family, friends, coworkers, et cetera, if you think about it, you can often predict how someone is going to react based on their prevailing personality traits. I know with my dad, who is a wonderful man and a teacher, as I've talked about before. He's always there with a homespun bit of wisdom and sage fatherly advice, no matter what the situation. He views it as a teachable moment. So you could always rely on him to offer you something that he views as an important life lesson. And so sometimes we'll even sort of push his buttons a little bit in an effort to give him a hard time, right? We've all do that, right? And certainly my own kids do that to me. So, and when it comes to character, individuality is key. It's very important. And for me, there's nothing worse than watching a comedy where the characters feel very interchangeable, and it feels like the jokes and the dialogue could sort of come out of any of the characters' mouths. There's certain shows that often start out very strong with very distinct, distinctly drawn character personalities, but then as the show sort of moves on over season after season, sometimes I found that those characters become more homogenous, and it feels very interchangeable, and they're just sort of relying on recycled material. So anyway, I think that's just something to keep in mind, is try to keep them distinct and interesting in their own right. Even if they're just a supporting character, it's great to have sort of a thought out story for all of your characters, even if you're never going to see that on screen, right? It's good to know as a storyteller where you're coming from. So I talked about the straw and the sticks and the brick of it all. And so thinking about the way those materials look in basic, just sort of simple geographic shapes, I thought, well, here's a good visual shorthand to start with to try to represent our characters in that distinct way. Again, this is not intended to be a design or final design in any way. I am not a character designer. I know just enough to make myself dangerous, and I rely on the talents of much more adept character designers than myself to kind of really bring it home at the end of the day. So, but I think it's important to think about the basic shapes, right? As I mentioned, and how those original building materials can, suggest the basic sort of silhouettes of our characters. And so if you really think about that very simple silhouette value, just by sort of taking the shape and darkening it in, blacking it in, you get a sense of a very distinct lineup right there, right? Everyone looks different. So as far as like silhouette value and drawing, that kind of thing, that's a different class that I'm sure is available on the website by much more talented teachers in that regard than myself. But I think for pitch purposes, as I said, it's really helpful to think about it, even in rudimentary fashion, because it helps others understand where you're coming from. Again, it's all about the clarity of the pitch, right? The best characters, if you think about it, have really readable silhouettes. Even some very famous characters in live action, the ones that kind of spring to mind for me are, if you see a silhouette of Darth Vader or E.T. or even Indiana Jones, they're immediately recognizable. You know exactly who those characters are without having to see any of the detail other than the outline. So I think that's a pretty impressive design trick to pull off, especially in live action. And so, as I mentioned, by filling in these shapes, you can see that the lineup of characters could be easily identified, right? Now, based on thinking about this approach, I'll do some quick doodles of our pig characters. Again, not meant to be character designs, but we'll have a little fun just doing some quick doodles of what they potentially could look like. So I'm gonna, let's just, have our little brick image here. Just do a quick little, suggestion of a brick, geometry, right? And, squared off, right? Sharp edges, all that kind of stuff, right? There's our brick, right? Based on that, I'm gonna just sort of knock down the opacity, and I will create a new level here in my Procreate program, which I love to use. It's very easy on my iPad to do this little doodle. And I'll just start playing around with what this pig might look like. So maybe he's kind of, a little blocky, right? Ears. So just kind of getting like a squared off, rigid type of shape language going. Maybe he has to wear his little shirt from his family construction business with the logo on it. Again, I'm thinking a little bit about the Richard Scarry, shape language of it. Just keeping it simple, right? Especially for now. Like as I said, not a character design, not intended to be a character design. More of just a shorthand, iconography that we're creating. So something like that. I'm not loving that yet, but let me just hide the brick layer. I'm going to just knock this guy down a little bit. And I'll just get a little, get a little more into the detail here. So I tend to draw with a pen a lot. I like drawing on the iPad. It's a nice tool if you have one. The Cintiqs are really great too. They're often obviously sort of rooted to generally where you are, but that's okay. And just doing this, without Photoshop, I find that Procreate for me tends to give me what I'm looking for. I don't love that. So I'm just trying to give him a quick little expression of a guy that feels like he's a bit put upon, right? Maybe he's just got like he loses his hair, maybe, right? Something like that. And he's just sort of like a little frustrated with life and, kind of get that kind of expression going there. Like feel put upon, right? Poor pig. If only everyone would do exactly what he told him, everything would be great. I'm going to give this guy like the little, this is very rough, but suggest the cloven hoof there of a pig. And a little bit of the truth in the animal world there. Maybe they have clothes, they have shirts and pants, but they don't have shoes. We've seen that trope before, which I think is kind of fun. A little more whimsy to it, I think. So yeah, sort of finish this guy out a little bit. A little bit of a blocky, rigid kind of character like we discussed about with the traits of bricks and trying to embody that brick, the feeling of a brick in a character design. So let me hide that. And not too shabby. All right, I'm going to add some color and we'll jump back into it and talk about his specific character traits. Okay, so we've got our brick doodle and we've got our character that sort of reflects that brick shape, right? Our main character. Again, it's a loose sketch meant to just sort of suggest his sort of approach to life in a visual way, and not meant to be a final design. So let's try to define this pig, this main character. Let's list some traits that might help us, again, create that sort of painting, if you will, start to form that picture of who this character could be. So this guy, he's our brick pig, if you will. So let's think about some characteristics that come to mind when we're thinking about that kind of material, that building material. So By no means are these meant to be set in stone, no pun intended, but it just gives us an idea to start from. And I think it'll be helpful when you're pitching it to somebody that's not familiar with your project, where you're headed with it, right? What are you thinking about? So thinking about the brick of it all, maybe this guy's hard-headed, maybe he's organized, right? Just the way laying bricks in there in a very sort of methodical way. Probably an efficient, hard worker, maybe unwavering, unbreakable, as it were, as bricks tend to be. And along with that, to me, sort of potentially goes like a type A personality, very organized, very matter of fact. This is the way we have to do everything. A bit of a controlling personality, perhaps. Along the same lines, kind of a rigid look at life, right? Inflexible. Starting to see myself a little bit in this, I'm afraid. And at the same time, in a positive way, it's probably pretty reliable, right? When the chips are down, you can count on this person because he's a responsible personality. He's the practical pig, right? And I think those are all good traits. Again, things might evolve as we really get into the specifics down the road, but it starts to paint a cool picture of who this character could be. And I think it's important also to start to think about and articulate at least an early version of what this character might want. We all talk, about the wants and needs of characters. I mentioned the Rolling Stones song, of course, as a guidepost for myself. So maybe this character wants to get out of his town of Farmington that we talked about before, that sort of rural, small, bucolic community, taking some inspiration from my own life. And maybe in this case, this character wants to really get out of town and escape his siblings, his family, the other two pigs who are driving him crazy, right? Because he feels like they're going nowhere in life, perhaps. Then you want to think about like, well, what does the character want specifically? And maybe in this case, again, a bit of a placeholder, but I think it's clear for now, and it can be thought through more in detail later. Maybe he wants to become an engineer or a builder in the big city, which is far away from Farmington, right? Over the hill and all that sort of thing, and where he can sort of start a life anew, right? And he wants this, but what potentially he really emotionally needs is something else. And perhaps that is needs to learn to sort of embrace the insanity of his siblings and learn to sort of nurture his family. And, emotionally, that's sort of the journey that potentially he needs to go on over the course of the series, right? And the series can still be episodic in nature. Of course, we know many shows like that where your characters are very clearly drawn. And even if they sort of learn a little bit of a lesson over the course of an episode, they tend to sort of reset by the next one. And that's sort of the comfort food of it all, if you will, when it comes to popular series like that. And that's completely fine. And so it doesn't mean that you can't have sort of a long goal for this character that maybe eventually he will get to do. But ultimately, for our purposes today, we're going to say that this pig needs to embrace the insanity and learn to nurture his family. So we also want to know, how is our main character going to get what he wants? And perhaps, what he needs to do, he wants to get what he wants, but at the same time, what he doesn't realize is he also needs something, right? So how does he get what he wants and needs? And perhaps that's by, without him realizing it, he needs to build a stronger foundation for his family and his failing family business, right? By being able to sort of rally his siblings together, perhaps impart some more practical approaches to life, but also be willing to be open to change and how some of their winning traits might help influence him and make him a better person. That will allow them to build a stronger foundation, not only as a family unit, which is the most important thing, but from a plot standpoint, also save this business of PigPens, their construction business, which is under threat. So let's talk about some character comps for our main character here. Again, I think it's a really useful tool. It's not specifically copying one specific character from another show or movie, but it's just creating a little bit of an image in people's heads of taking elements of various characters and letting them become hopefully something unique, right? So just to reference some of these comps I pulled that sprung to mind off the top of my head, Michael Bluth, Jason Bateman's character from Arrested Development, who to me, I think it's an appropriate comp because he's constantly put upon by his goofball family members. It's a much larger family. And he's there to kind of come back and wrangle them and help keep his father out of jail. And he's the responsible one that they all sort of turn to and dump their problems on. And so I feel like that's a pretty good comp for us. Also, there's Jimmy Stewart as George Bailey from the Christmas classic, It's a Wonderful Life. And I always like this character because he comes from the small town of Bedford Falls, and he is anxious to get out there and see the world. The very first scene, he's sort of got this suitcase with all the different stickers on it, and he's going to go travel. He's ready to go, but life gets in the way for him, and he ends up shouldering the responsibility of maintaining his family savings and loan. When his brother, who was going to take it over, goes off to college and then off to war, he feels like life is constantly getting in the way, and he loses the forest for the trees, if you've seen the film, and ends up gaining a new appreciation for the life that he actually is able to create in his hometown, which he never planned to do. So again, I think another great comp, a really wonderful character. Here's Janine Teagues from Abbott Elementary, Quinta Brunson's character, the creator of the show. She's really an amazing creative force. And I love the character of Janine. It's maybe a little off kilter from this practical pig, but I like her character because she's very anxious to improve her standing at the school, the elementary school, Abbott Elementary, where she teaches. She's very hardworking and practical, but also she's very funny and sort of a little bit naive in her own way. But I like her too because she has sort of big dreams for her career, and she wants to improve the school and the way that the teachers are treated and that sort of thing. And so I think for me, coming from a family of teachers, I'm definitely inspired by her character and that show in general too, by the way. And then finally, here's Leslie Knope, played by Amy Poehler in Parks and Recreation, another one of my favorite characters. She's, of course, the ultimate optimist to the point of it, being a little over the top with it, and in a really fun way. She's very type A. She's very organized, very reliable until she kind of gets in her own way. So I feel like another great example of characteristics that we can draw from for our main pig here, who, for the sake of our pitch, I'm going to call Paul Porkrind. Right? I think it's fun to sort of think of some potential names for our characters. I'm a big alliteration fan. I think it sort of helps with the comedy of it in this case. Growing up comics fan, I always loved the alliteration, particularly in the Marvel characters like Bruce Banner and Stephen Strange and Reed Richards and so on and so forth. And so, I think it'd be fun in this case to find a last name that, suggestive of pigs, of porcine animals, and have a little fun with it. And so, let's call them the Porkrind siblings. And this guy's name is Paul Porkrind, right? Right. Okay, so let's talk. Let's have some fun doodling. Our potential straw character here. What might the straw pig look like? So we have our little basic sort of straw shape, right? And sort of blows in the wind, drifty, right? That sort of thing, breezy. Sort of fill in this just to give it a little bit of a shape to it. I'll do a quick new layer here. And maybe this character, again, life, sort of drifting along and not worried too much about things, maybe always a big smile on their face. Think a little bit of like Goofy. Think of like Goofy doesn't seem to have a lot of problems. Apart from the Goofy movie where he's portrayed as a father figure, more the classic Goofy if he's just kind of silly and out there causing a lot of problems and not worrying too much about life. So maybe this pig is, sort of maybe a little curly Q hair or something like that blows in the wind. I like the idea of making this pig potentially a female character, differentiate it. Kind of interesting shape here, hopefully. Give her a little shirt and pants that she has to wear to work at PigPens Family Construction. There's something like that, maybe. I think that's starting to work. Let's see. Do a little bit of a quick cleanup pass. I never have as much confidence in my drawing, so I always feel the need to go over it and over it and over it. And obviously, the iPad provides the ability to do that uh, uh, until the cows come home. No pun intended. In terms of the farm animals of it all. So here we can just go over this a little bit. Starting to take shape, right? A little bit different from the brick pig that we were just doodling and talking about. And give her some eyelashes here. A little bit of a goofy expression, at least for our pitch purposes. I like that little curly hair. Big nostrils, right? Definitely says pig, hopefully. And sort of a little bit of a breezy shape to it. Here we go. Talk amongst yourselves while I doodle away here. I'll give her like a nice little pig curly Q tail. It's a super cute aspect of pig's anatomy. And yeah. Give her those little cloven hoofs like we did her brother, right? Oh, that's starting to take shape, okay. I'll clean up a little bit more and add some color to it. And yeah, straw pig starting to take a little bit of a distinctive shape here for the purposes of our pitch. Again, not a design. I feel the need to caveat that repeatedly because I don't love my character designs, but hopefully it conveys clearly what we're starting to think about. Okay, so let's move on to our straw pig, as it were, the straw sibling. Here's the little geographic shape to represent it, right? And when I think about straw, I think about the fact that it bends easily, drifts in the wind, that sort of thing. And so that gives us a nice way to approach this other pig character. So I'll do a quick little doodle to see what this pig might look like. Okay, so here is our potential little sketch of this pig. I want to make this one a female character. They never really make it a super distinction in some of the versions, whether they're male or female or whatever. But we want to shake it up, and I think it'd be fun to have this pig sibling be a female character. So here she is, and let's think about some traits that apply to, as I said, the straw material. So. She potentially bends easily, right? Much like straw, maybe not a very sturdy material, as we learned from the wolf blowing down her house in the original stories. Probably a bit of a disorganized character, goes where the wind blows, as it were. We all know people like that, of just sort of their followers and don't really worry too much about leading the way, which is okay. Maybe a bit of a free spirit, right? And consequently, maybe not so serious about life. I'm dialing into the original pigs, the other two pigs being more frivolously portrayed, that sort of thing, more carefree. So that's where I'm sort of going with it here. And also probably a silly character, right? It's an opportunity for a little bit of a comedic foil to our main character, Paul, who is very sort of sturdy and maybe a little bit more serious. And, a bit of breezy personality, right? Maybe our character, the straw pig, sort of wants to drift through life with no real plan of what life might bring them, right? She hasn't kind of figured it out yet. And maybe she will. Hopefully she will, thanks to her relationship with her siblings. As far as comps for this character, thinking about characters that we've seen out there on TV, I think it's still very important to draw some comps for these other characters because she is a main character. I was thinking of Phoebe Buffay from Friends as kind of the most applicable one. A very daffy but loving character who always has something interesting going on and plays music and sings silly songs and is a masseuse but always there for her, her friends on that show. Also Buster Bluth, who I love from Arrested Development. Michael Bluth, the main character's younger brother, who is sort of a big mama's boy and is just kind of floating along through life, right? Kelly Kapoor, Mindy Kaling's character from The Office. Maybe just a slight tangent here, but I like that she's sort of, blissfully unaware of the way the world works and sort of wrapped up in herself a little bit. And then, of course, one of my favorite characters is Andy Dwyer, Chris Pratt's character on Parks and Recreation, who is essentially sort of a human golden retriever, just there to sort of enjoy the day and bounce around and that sort of thing with no real plan. And as the series showed with that character, he sort of maneuvered his way through life doing various things and essentially is there for, that reliable, fun comedic humor. Then I think this character, thinking about the name for her, I did a quick little sort of Google of like names that, had like a gentle feel to it, that sort of thing. And I like the P name. I like the alliteration of it all. So I'm naming this character Paisley Porkrind, right? And so she's going to be the sister to Paul Porkrind, and that's the second of our pigs. Okay, so let's take a crack at just doing a doodle or two of our stick pig, as it were. We've got the brick pig, we've got the straw pig, and I'm thinking about obviously a stick, nice straight line there. So let's think about the general sort of shape of our stick pig, and upright, rigid, that sort of thing, uptight, and here we go. Knock that back on opacity, do a quick little drawing over it. And what's this pig going to look like? Okay, well, let's just keep it upright, right? Like maybe taller than the others, again, to sort of keep that interesting silhouetted lineup going. So the pig siblings are all going to be instantly recognizable and distinct, hopefully, to a certain degree. So maybe this pig is, the challenge is to sort of find a way to suggest that the straw pig and the stick pig have similar ideologies. They're both sort of frivolous and carefree, but that doesn't mean they have to be exactly the same. So I'm going to try to just make them a little bit different than that silly straw pig that we just drew. Maybe this guy is a male character as opposed to the female character. I'm going to make him a little more rigid, right? Like sticks, very prickly, very sharp, that sort of thing. So maybe he's sort of upright and unwavering to a degree, till he snaps. Maybe he snaps easily, right? That sort of thing. So let that shape of the material that we're inspired by from the original story help define how this character might look down the road. It's kind of cool. Maybe they'll give him like an infinity scarf or something like that. I'm thinking this character is maybe just a little bit of a spoiled character, which we'll talk about as we get into the traits here. Maybe we'll give him like some cool like Tony Stark shades, those ones that you can kind of see through. They're gold or something maybe. And I'll just do a quick little cleanup of this guy. I'll just do a quick little cleanup of this guy, and we can move along in our day here. There we go. So again, maybe just the stick, a little bit of a sharper personality, right? He's not too, he doesn't want to deal with anybody that gets in his way of his own, selfishness, perhaps. Something he needs to sort of learn to deal with. He needs to learn how to be a better brother. Maybe. Let's see. Maybe I don't know if he's got a little bit of hair or not. Something to figure out later. Anyway, maybe he's sort of dissatisfied with the meal that's been served him, like a little bit of an eye roll or something, right? Again, kind of the spoiled brat, if you will. So living a life without consequence is kind of what I'm starting to think about. There's his little cloven hoofs, crossed arms. Again, I'm just quickly roughing this in, but hopefully it sells the pose and the bit of the personality. Some little buttons. I mean, it's probably a designer shirt that cost a lot of money. Probably really shouldn't have spent the money, but did anyway, maybe. We've all been there.
And give him some cloven feet there. Starting to feel like Bob Ross, and I feel like maybe I should draw a happy little tree next to him or something. But there we go. There's our stick pig. All right, so here's my approach to our stick pig. Again, trying to find something that's a little bit different from our straw pig, Paisley. So let's think about some traits of sticks, if you will, right, that might help inform this guy's personality. When I think of sticks, branches, that sort of thing, I think, okay, prickly, maybe there's some thorns on there, right? Maybe this character is literally a stick in the mud, right? Kind of hard to sort of motivate, that sort of thing. Again, we want this character to sort of reflect the idea that they're living sort of a carefree, frivolous lifestyle, but we're already sort of doing that specifically with the Paisley character. So let's find another little lane here that can still serve this character in a distinct way. Maybe this character is sort of ineffective, if you will, like the stick home that the big bad wolf blows over. Snaps easily, like maybe literally, snapping at his brother Paul and his sister Paisley, perhaps. A piercing, sort of sharp personality. Maybe this character splinters like wood, right? Maybe there's an opportunity in some of our stories to let them be tempted by maybe the big bad wolf schemes or something else, and you feel like he's going to fall away from the family, and it's a struggle for Paul to kind of rally them together. Again, just thinking out loud here. And ultimately, as a way to differentiate him from Paisley, maybe this guy is a spoiled character, because ultimately his want could still be something that is frivolous, but maybe it's different than the Paisley character in that he wants to live a sort of a lavish lifestyle without consequence, right? The world is my oyster, I get what I want, that sort of thing, and I don't have to work for it. So that's a different way to sort of shade that same approach. So let's talk about some comps for this guy and see if we can find some relatable characters to talk about. Some that immediately sprung to mind were Dwight Schrute from The Office, Rainn Wilson's character, who, if you know that show, a great character. He's very arrogant, very prickly, like our stick guy. Maybe not quite as sharp as he thinks he is, right? He thinks he knows everything, but maybe doesn't really know a lot about, a lot about the reality of how the world works. But ultimately, what I think is interesting about Dwight, it's worth pointing out, is that deep down, he's actually quite loyal, and it just has to sort of be brought to the surface through his relationships with the other characters. So I think that's something really interesting to consider for this guy. Another character is Lindsay Bluth. I know I'm going back to the Arrested Development well, but it's a great ensemble comedy, and if you don't know it, check it out because there's great personalities in that show. And Lindsay is Michael's younger sister, Jason Bateman's younger sister in that show. She is sort of the stereotypical spoiled rich girl. She, lives a life with no consequence. Money's no object. She just spends money on the credit cards, doesn't worry about anything, about paying them off. And but at the same time, she feels like she's wise in the ways of the world. And so I think she's a really interesting character to consider for our guy. And finally, here is Tahani Al-Jamil, a wonderful character from The Good Place, a wonderful comedy by Michael Schur, who created Parks and Rec, co-created it. And she's played by Jamila Jamil, a British actress and comedian. And she's a great character. She, a very condescending, arrogant character. She tended to talk down to the Kristen Bell character and the other characters in the show, constantly bragging about herself and her exploits and the people she knows. But ultimately, what was interesting was that her arrogance masked an insecurity that came out over the course of the series. So I think these three sort of paint a nice, interesting picture for who this pig could be, who I've decided to call Preston. So Preston Porkrind, it seems like a very, self-important name of a character. And so now we have our three sibling pigs. We have Paul, Paisley, and Preston Porkrind. So that's a mouthful. Don't say it too many times, too fast, because you're going to trip over your words in the pitch. But I think it paints a nice comedic approach to the characters that we're talking about. And so in our show PigPens, we've discussed that they have this family business. And I think, it's a family construction business is an interesting way to go because it's, goes back to the original source material, building, that sort of thing, construction. And I think it'd be great to just call the business what we're calling the show, which is PigPens, right? Because pens, get it? Fencing, that sort of thing. And so their family business, PigPens Family Construction, is perhaps falling under threat. And what's that threat? Well, now we go back to the source material again. It's the big bad wolf. And here's a beautiful wolf photo. Obviously, in real life, wolves are very complex, beautiful creatures. But at the end of the day, they are predators. And this character, as in the original story, will be the antagonist who tests our pig's relationship, right? The siblings are coming apart at the seams. And ultimately, over the course of the series, they have to come back together and build a strong foundation through their relationships and also their business in order to sort of repel the wolf's advances and threat to their town. So in this story, we really want to play into the predatory truth of wolves. And I think our wolf, wants to destroy that business, right? Because he views them as a competitor that needs to be squashed and crushed. And we won't use the idea from the original story that the wolf like literally eats and devours the pigs. I think that's a little off the tone that we're going for. Instead, I think metaphorically, our wolf will try to devour our heroes by destroying and devouring their business, right? And devouring their hometown of Farmington. So here's a quick doodle I had done of the wolf. And, he is a savvy, sort of slick businessman. And just to think about his traits potentially, I'm looking at this guy as as a contrast to our heroes. Maybe he's very charming in a way that is just disengaging and everyone loves him. In a way that Paul Porkrind, our main character, struggles to sort of connect to people and get people to love him. So we give him a taller mountain to climb. Maybe our wolf is, malicious underneath, right? But he appears altruistic. He wants to help others, of course, right? He's there. He's a wealthy, important person, but he's actually a destructive character. He professes to be one of the pack. Of course, wolves live in packs, and perhaps our wolf is no different. And he says, "Oh, I want to be part of this community. I'm moving into town here, and I want to just be one of you and help out and all that sort of thing." But ultimately, he could be revealed to be a lone wolf who's in it for himself, and ultimately a character that's lacking in empathy, which is obviously a very important trait in humanity. And as most wolves are, he's stealthy. So he can go about his business, scheming his schemes in a secretive nature. And it's up to our characters, particularly Paul, to sort of get to the root of what's going on and what's this guy's real agenda and what's he really all about. He's out to destroy our business, out to destroy our town. So what our wolf wants, I think, is to secretly drive PigPens Family Construction Incorporated out of business so that he can swoop in with his own business, which I think would be fun to sort of call it like big bad development, big bad real estate development, something like that. And he wants to develop all of Farmington, right? A lot of valuable land out there, these rural farms in this small community. He wants to develop all of Farmington, essentially raise it to the ground in the long term, maybe build a very expensive gated community to sort of attract all sort of wealthy, individuals. And along with that, of course, would go this sort of exclusive country club filled with golf courses and whatever else seems frivolous to a certain degree, and something that the hardworking townsfolk of Farmington wouldn't necessarily need or want in their lives, especially at the expense of their own well-being. So, he moves into town under the guise of caring, but eventually he's going to slowly prey on the good nature of our townsfolk, who are nice folks, to get what he wants. And it's up to our heroes, particularly Paul, to sort of ferret him out, if you will. Thinking about comps to the wolf, I think, is also worthwhile, by the way. And so I'm thinking of him, as I mentioned, sort of like a mogul-type personality. There's certainly plenty of those in the real world. Maybe this guy has the charm and good looks of actors like John Hamm, Rob Lowe, who I'm sure are lovely people, and but definitely immediately jump off the page, off the screen as really good-looking, charming fellows that maybe you'd want to meet and have a meal with. As far as characters go, I was thinking of a minor character from the comedy Modern Family some years ago that Rob Riggle played. I had the pleasure of working with Rob on Prep and Landing Naughty versus Nice, a really great guy, and very sort of boisterous, big personality, very charming. And his character on Modern Family was a real estate rival of Phil Dunphy, the main father character on that show. And Gil was very aggressive, sort of real estate rival, very charming but predatory in a comedic way. So I think that's it's a little bit of a deep pull for a comp, but I think one that's not too hard to describe. And also, famously, is Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street from the '80s, a very famous film. They made a sequel later, portrayed by Michael Douglas, who won the Oscar for it. And he was a ruthless businessman who exploited the desires of the main character, Bud Fox, played by Charlie Sheen, to get what he wanted, to essentially steamroll, Charlie's family's business, buy it out, sell it off, make money, and crush others' livelihood, without any sort of regard for their well-being. And so again, a character that lacked empathy. Another thing to notice is that all these guys seem to point a lot. So I just noticed that pulling all these images, they're all pointing at each other. So there you go. And I'm going to call this guy Lester Lupine, right? Lupine, the wolf sort of based last name. And again, the alliteration of it, just like the way it rolls off the tongue. Also worth noting is supporting characters that might fill out our world over the course of different episodes. I really love, as I've discussed in the past, like worlds that can build and continue to evolve, and where you're meeting all these new characters with very interesting, distinct personalities and backstories. Parks and Recreation and The Simpsons, I think, are both really great examples of shows that did that, as well as Arrested Development, by the way. Lots of just characters that they're very clearly defined, often very funny, but very specific. And so they can sort of drop in and out of stories as needed, as dictated by the needs of that particular episode. So for these supporting characters, for PigPens, I think it'd be fun to just keep it simple for now. Let's draw from some, recognizable farm animals, maybe some rural animals, to stay truthful to this established world that we're suggesting, right? This sort of farm-inspired small town in an animal world. So let's kind of stick with, farm animals as opposed to like a lion or something like that, and not go quite as sort of expansive as what we'd see in like some of Richard Scarry's illustrations, where all kinds of animals interact with each other, that sort of thing. So let's just kind of keep a lid on it at the moment for the purposes of our pitch. Down the road, maybe if it became a series, there's ways to bring in all kinds of different characters from all kinds of different walks of life. But let's just keep it simple for now. So I want to think of characters that will ultimately support the main character's emotional journey on a real sort of fundamental level. Paul Porkrind, our main pig, who needs to sort of learn to embrace, unifying his family, rallying his community together, and ultimately will sort of find emotional satisfaction out of that. What sort of personalities would be helpful to teach him that, even if it's in a very subliminal way, not necessarily an overt way, but just by their actions, these supporting characters can help inform Paul as the journey he should be on. Sometimes it's referred to as like doppelganger characters that the audience, sometimes the main character, will recognize are sort of versions of themselves if they went a different road. One good example that springs to mind off the top of my head is the character of Gollum in The Lord of the Rings. The way they're portrayed in the films, the way that Gollum is portrayed in the films is he's essentially a very cautionary tale, a cautionary doppelganger of Frodo Baggins, the main character who has this, the ring of power that he's looking to destroy. He's on this really epic quest, and Gollum is constantly a threat to his attempts to accomplish his goal. And Gollum is a character who possessed that ring for many hundreds of years, and as a result, it destroyed his mind, it destroyed his body, and it's, in a way, if you think about it, it's what Frodo could become if he doesn't complete his quest. So that's what I mean about it. It's a very quick example of what I mean by a doppelganger character. So they don't all have to be that, but it's interesting to sort of find ways to plug those kinds of characters in. As far as like the different farm animals, Just off the top of my head, I think it's just worth noting a few for our pitch. We don't have to go into great detail now. Again, I think we can flesh them out later. But let's just have a quick, simple exercise of it. So again, I'm sort of steering away from wild animals for simplicity's sake. Let's have the wolf be that lone outsider that comes in, right? So everybody else is sort of a farm-related creature. That allows us to lean into the truths about these specific animals to suggest those different personality types. So I'm, as I said, thinking about characters that can sort of really flesh out the world in the spirit of Parks and Rec, Simpsons, Arrested Development, that sort of thing. So I pulled some images here. Here's a rooster and a hen, and just below it, some pictures of some little chicks, right? Some little adorable chicks. So maybe for our world of Farmington, they could represent some kind of really lovely family unit that lives in town, and the kids are adorable, and they say adorable things to Paul, and they come into the construction business, and the rooster and the hen are in there to buy some paint or whatever it might be, and you can imagine some fun interactions there. And they essentially sort of represent to, at some point, to Paul and his siblings, what's at stake, right? Like these folks might lose their livelihood. Another fun character to consider, growing up, in the Deters dairy farm, as I'd mentioned, with all my cousins and family members that ran the business, I have to put in a Holstein cow in there for my own personal sort of edification. So I've got this Holstein in the middle here. Maybe she, like when you think of a cow, okay, they give milk, they're nurturing. Cow is a female. And so maybe this is old Mrs. Holstein, who's been there forever, offering homespun wisdom, that sort of thing. Can sort of maybe offer some sage advice at times to Paul and to the other pigs as we're going through our episodes. Maybe there's some sheep there. And I just was thinking about the axiom of like a wolf in sheep's clothing. So maybe there's something really interesting there. I don't know exactly what would happen, but it's worth sort of thinking about the idea that maybe there's a flock of sheep in Farmington, or a family, if you will, that sort of represents a flock of sheep, and maybe they sort of become unwitting accomplices of Lester Lupine, our wolf character. So they're sort of a wolf in sheep's clothing. So they're sort of a wolf in sheep's clothing, if you will, but there's some fun to be had there. Anyway, something to think about. And then maybe there's a duck who, obviously they're quacking and flapping around all the time. So maybe off the top of my head, maybe they're like a town gossip. So for the purposes of our pitch, like I said, I'm not getting too deep into these characters, but I think it's worth just kind of throwing up some images here in our pitch to suggest where we could go, where the possibilities lie, right? Ultimately, like let's say the series gets picked up, we're making, many episodes of it. There's probably an opportunity to bring in some other rural kind of creatures that we would find that I would have encountered in the woods growing up in Quincy, raccoons or possums or deer or mice or birds, those kind of things. So the possibilities are on this. Like I said, I'm just keeping it simple for now, and let's just, for the purposes of our pitch that we're making, just have that wolf be that one sort of lone outsider that rolls into town. And we'll leave it wide open down the road to really draw from people in our own lives to flesh out all of those relatable personalities, right? So you want to find ways to make those characters relatable, very gettable. Like I said, I mentioned my prep and landing examples of our coworkers that we had at Disney, and there's no reason why you can't draw from your own lives to start to create some really interesting personalities in the supporting characters as well. Give them all a story to tell. Okay, so let's move on to the next section.